Welcome to the Spoiler Alert Podcast. I'm your host, Nate Krenz. My co-host and co-creator, Dakota Scott, is in the other window. And
Creator.
create,
Oh,
who creates the creators though, right? We'll save that for a
am I the
Prometheus
chicken or
episode.
the egg? Yeah, I don't know.
um, uh, uh, but today, what we're doing is 1990s Quigley Down Under. Now, this is not the most well-known of semi-modern westerns, um, but it is a 90s western starring Tom Selleck and Alan Rickman. And I want to get the name of the actress because it's a little difficult to pronounce. Uh, and it's also starring Laura San Giacomo, who who was coming off of a success in Sex Lies and Videotape, which I don't know
Oh,
if you've seen that movie, but that's what she's known for, is a big thing.
okay. No, I've
Um,
seen I've seen part of it, but not nearly enough to yeah. So not all the way through, certainly. But
yeah, that was one of Steven
wasn't that
Soderbergh's.
Sandberg's breakthrough film, right? And that it
Yeah,
had
it,
yeah.
yeah, it had Spader. It was one of, if not like the breakthrough for Steven Soderbergh. He like won the Palme d'Or for it.
I thought
Uh,
that was his first film.
it might have
Or
been.
am I wrong?
It
Okay.
it it might have been like Quigley Down Under begins with this cowboy from America shipping off west from California over to Australia.
Mhm.
Uh
Uh, yeah, it was just Alan Rickman hires the best sharpshooter in the world, and Quigley is, I guess, the man. I think Rickman says that every other applicant sent in, just a letter, but Quigley sends in a letter punctuated by bullet holes. Closely. Yeah, I don't know what that proves because they could be close range, but whatever. I guess it made an impression, and that was, so
it's a resume builder.
yeah. Um, some things happen before that, but ultimately he arrives at to Alan Rickman and he puts him to the task, to make sure he's actually hired the right guy. But yeah, it made an impression. So um,
Yeah. And one of the things like this movie kind of reminds me of like how a lot of like average westerns would begin, where it's just like stranger comes into new town, meets
yeah,
meets like meets attractive lady, meets sketchy guy or sketchy gang of whatever, like, so uh you know so that's kind of, I guess, like, sort of a homage. um like one of the first things we do is we meet Cora, who is
yep,
Crazy Cora.
yeah,
She she doesn't know Quigley doesn't know her, and she immediately just starts calling him Roy, and
yeah.
like stuff like that, and like pretending that they had a marriage and had a baby.
The only thing I'd say short before we get there is, I mean, yeah. So Cora, I mean, at first I didn't know if it was a ruse, like she's just trying to get out of the situation or something. But it becomes apparent that she's actually convince of whoever the fuck Roy is. This is who Tom Selleck's character is. So, but the other thing is Marston's men, not the nicest people, but then he gets into a scuffle, I guess, with them, and then it turns out that they're actually the people that are supposed to escort him to Marston's ranch. We don't know who Marston is or why we're going there or whatever at this point, but they're not nice, and
Mhm.
whatever, they're kind of trying to take advantage of Cora and whatever, and turns into this big brawl, and then they realize that, oh, this is the guy we're supposed to take there. But it does say something about their character, and by extension probably the character of Marston,
Right.
so yeah, so there's kind of some setup there. It's not hugely important, but
um
no, it's
but they take a wagon route. They take a wagon ride through portion of the outback, and stop by at Marston's ranch, who it's an Alan Rickman character, and he's playing it up, and he's
As soon
it's
as you
evil.
see him, you know he's going to be a villain.
He's gonna be
I mean,
he's
maybe
an
that's,
asshole.
I don't know at the time if you would think that, because before that, all he'd really done was Die Hard, you say. So this was, his follow-up film. But me, knowing Rickman, is you just like, he's going to be the fucking villain. So, but maybe it's not as obvious at the time. I don't know.
Yep.
But yeah.
And he right away puts him to the test, and this is one of I think one of the better scenes of the movie, is he tests out his shooting range, and he gets a guy to ride with a bucket and just tell me when you want him to stop, and it's just like he's just loading his gun, setting his sight, not even
there's some
like
serious gun porn in this movie, especially early on,
yeah, not even looking up. And then he finally tells Rickman to call off the guy setting up the bucket, and then
he's not even looking. He's like, about there will do.
yeah, about there. And then he ends up sniping it like 3 times, and it's probably half a mile away.
Yeah, it's pretty far.
That was a funny scene. That was a funny way to set up that character, kind of both characters too, because Alan Rickman's character is constantly underestimating people. That's one thing that that's one of his fatal flaws. He underestimates Quigley a lot. He doesn't really. One of my criticisms of the movie is he doesn't really have much of a dialogue or physical connection in any way with Cora that I can recall. So that makes it a little not as interesting as it could be. But he also underestimates, the Aboriginal people that he has like working for him for if anything, very little, but it looks plantation slavery like when you get to his ranch.
It's actually interesting that you bring that up, because now I'm just thinking that there's sort of a similarity between Cora and the way his mother dies, that maybe he could have.
Yeah, at this point in the movie, Quigley seems kind of mistrusting of, or at least slow to trust Marston. Marston does kind of seem to treat his own ranchers poorly, and then later on he has Quigley over for dinner, and we realize that he treats the Aboriginal people and in general, as well as the Aboriginal people working for him, like absolute dog shit. Like he proposes to Quigley that we're not hunting big game or anything here. Like we're hunting Aboriginal people.
Rickman kind of draws Selleck in under false pretenses. He says he's just there to shoot the wildlife. Kind of lures the deserters early on. I mean, I think that's his first statement, is with those deserters, of like what kind of person he is. So he kind of baits them into going for the weapons, and then he blows them away at close range, So I think there's something there about luring people in up close, and then I'm probably really straining here. He wants to shoot the Aboriginals, but they're not close enough for him to shoot. That's why he needs a long range sharpshooter. Maybe there's some kind of character statement there. I can't piece it together.
He's a bit cowardly. Like he doesn't want to get his own hands dirty, basically.
Yeah, at first, because then when Quigley kicks his ass, he's like, he goes in there, and then the second time he's like, okay, go get him, and it's sort of a similar thing at the end. So yeah, probably something. I don't.
Yeah, and
maybe there's nothing to it. I don't know.
I think it just kind of boils down to like he's used to having like, a kill brought to him, and he might and like he would do it like. He's a wealthy man who was, his backstory is, we'll just move in on some characters right now. We'll do Marston first. Why not? His background is, and he explains this that night where he has dinner with Quigley. He explains that his parents were murdered by the Aboriginals, or
at least his mother.
Yeah, for sure his mother.
Yeah.
I think he said his parents, both of them.
Mm.
Like Quigley's a movie that I think its heart is in the right place and it does a lot of things well. I thought the
Yeah.
score was pretty damn good.
Yeah,
Like
I even looked it up. Yeah, Basil Polyduris or something. Polyduris. I haven't heard of him before, but some of the tracks are just average, but some are really really good. So
yeah,
that stuck out to me.
yeah, like some, and I know what you mean. Like some, it's just some were like you were doing too much. You know what I mean? Where there were a couple
Yeah,
scenes there where you did not need any score at all, or it should be very minimal, and it was just kind of like the cliche kind of western like
yeah,
womp 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 kind of music when it's like a
yeah. Actually, you had some literal
talking scene
was.
and someone has a snake in their boot or something like that kind
Right.
of scene. Yeah,
Yeah.
those musical notes are a little cliche, but the main theme, the main hero theme, is pretty damn good.
And there's some other ones that are, yeah, surprisingly kind of nuanced. Like they really do actually bring the emotion out of a scene in sort of an unexpected way, without it feeling forced in the way that some of the other tracks kind of are. The more actiony tracks can feel a bit forced, but the emotional cues are actually nuanced, which is, I think, it really important and kind of helps those scenes because they're not always terribly subtle, but the soundtrack helps them out a lot, I think. So yeah, I was really surprised by it. There's definitely some good tracks. So
Yep. What kind of boils down in the Quigley Marston like dinner, or in the Quigley Marston dinner, is that uh, Marston explains his backstory and says that, hey, you're here to help me kill the Aboriginal people. And then the next scene is you see him like you see
fly up.
uh yeah, Alan Rickman flying through the air out of the
Glass
house,
door.
and he's like, no one pushes me out of my house, or no one forces me out of my house, and goes right back in and then punches right back. So
Yeah,
that's another
it looks ridiculous and everything. It's very over the top. The way he flies out, you don't even see Selleck. You know,
yeah. And I just wish that the Alan Rickman character wasn't just like the kind of pampered villain. You know what I mean?
right?
Like
If you set
I don't
something
know.
up very interesting, just wanted to do it.
I feel like Rickman can do more if it's if the villain were a little more intimidating, but really you're only intimidated by the villain's numbers. You know what I mean? Like by how much
Right.
ranchers he has at his disposal and stuff to go fight for him. And then the standoff doesn't last long because, like we said, he has a number of ranchers, and the guy sneaks in behind and knocks Quigley out. It was
Yeah.
the Aboriginal servant actually knocked out
His
Quigley.
butler servant. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
From
that's
behind, yeah. But he flips the table. He just kind of kicks back with the bottle of, like, I think it's wine or whatever, and and he's just camping out, ready to take everybody on. And then surprisingly, the very person that, the whole reason is he's outraged at the prospect of murdering the indigenous, the Aboriginals, and it turns out to be the Aboriginal that bonks him over the head, and turns him over to Alan Rickman's character. So but yeah, I thought there was going to be this big shootout that doesn't happen.
yeah.
So yeah, I actually really liked it. It was the first thing that I think I really liked about the movie was that it didn't drag out that conflict. Like you didn't watch Rickman's cruelty over an extended period of time before he goes, oh, I just can't take it anymore. Like they just cut to the chase. He's like, they're so fundamentally different, and that it just wastes absolutely no time. Like the second Rickman, basically confesses that, yeah, I lured you out here under false pretenses. You're not here to shoot, animals. You're here to shoot the Aboriginals. Then just it like cuts to him flying out the window, and then it all erupts into, yeah. So I actually did like that just wastes no time, in getting to the central conflict of the film, because how that's going to play out. So they just don't bother even doing it. They're just like, they're going to clash because they're fundamentally different. So yeah, Would be very hero-like to gradually, shoot Aboriginals and then just be like, oh, my heart's not in it anymore. This is just,
it's not like a slow pull towards
no,
like, you know what I
no,
mean?
it's immediate.
Yeah.
So he has a very hard line in the sand there, but
Yeah, and they kind of explain a little bit of what he saw in America there, because he saw a little bit about the Native American population. That was loosely mentioned,
yeah,
and
you can infer enough that he's sympathetic to the plight of the natives in America, but I mean, it's not explicitly stated, but it is by Rickman being cast out of out of his own home through the glass door. But yeah, so but they do draw that comparison, which is a fairly obvious one. But yeah.
But they're in this wagon. They're being drugged out into the middle of the outback, and they're going to be Quigley and Cora are going to be abandoned there to die. It's kind of like the water bucket scene again, where he has to, because he stabs one.
Oh yeah.
He stabs one of his attempted murderers that's going to go set them out in the middle of the desert. He stabs one of them and then grabs his gun, and then the other one is just hightailing it back to the ranch, and like he needs to kill that guy, otherwise they're either going to be caught or they're not going to be able to get to the wagon and get water, which
not the whole thing. It's kind of like Quantum of Solace, where like the whole or maybe Good, Bad, and the Ugly would be better. At least he gives them Tuco a chance in Good, Bad, and the Ugly. But Rickman orders them brought out so far into the desert by wagon that they can't possibly walk back to civilization. So they're gonna, the whole idea is to let the desert kill them. But and Quigley's beat to shit. So is the woman Cora, and he lures. So when he first arrives, he said part of the deal was, you give me 50 gold coins or something like that, to Rickman, and Rickman gives him that, and then in front of all of the henchmen or whatever. And so Quigley beaten half to death or whatever, is like, you forgot the gold, and that lures one of the henchmen over to him, and he had like a boot knife or something on him, and so once he gets in close, he stabs him, and then for whatever reason, the henchman brings the rifle, Quigley's rifle. Oh, genius move, I guess. But I don't know. Maybe that's all he had. So then Quigley, beat to hell, tries to line up the shot on actually, the other henchman's quite intelligent, because he's like, fuck this. He tries to get out of there. So he doesn't go for the gold or try to overpower Quigley. He's just like, screw this. Doesn't try to help his buddy. Just, so... which I actually thought was quite good. But yeah, then Quigley struggles to line up the shot, get the bullet in. It becomes this tense moment, because it's not explicitly stated, but you as the audience kind of recognize that if he can't shoot this dude and get a hold of those horses in that wagon, they're fucked. So he has to line up that shot. He uses the corpse of the one dude he just stabbed to stabilize, and that's another thing. I mean, he's factoring in the wind, and I think he's looking at the reeds and the way they're blowing. So it's really tense, and I almost didn't think he was going to do it, but but yeah, he lines up the shot, shoots the guy. It's his first headshot in a PG-13. It's hard to work around a headshot, but shoots him in the head. The second one, actually, I feel like a kid talking about this, but there's one later in the film where it's like freaking right point blank. I'm like, ooh, they got away with that. So, but it actually is pretty exciting, and yeah, so he shoots them, but of course the horses keep running, so they have to catch up to them. But at least,
and they never actually get back to the wagon though, so that kind of saps.
Actually, they didn't, did they? Shit, yeah. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, so it's all pointless.
That retroactively saps some drama out of that scene, but when you're watching,
because he rides off, or that's after the Aboriginals are attacked.
Yeah, they get saved. Yep, and
yeah, okay.
So shortly after, they're not doing well. Like, no. And they're not. There's not a ton of dialogue here because they're literally just walking through the desert, trying not to die. And then,
it's like Eastwood and Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, where it's just you've seen that scene play out a lot.
Yeah, and they both end up collapsing. Like he tries carrying her and gets like about 10 feet.
Does he? Because that's what I was just trying to remember. I remember him taking his bandolier off of her, which it almost looked like he's going to walk on. Or does he actually help her?
He almost just like took her shit and then walked away, but then he was like, "Fuck," and like turned around and like picked her up, but he only lasted like 10
paces feet. Or some shit. Yeah.
And then they wake up and they're like in this Aboriginal camp, like this Aboriginal camp, and they're performing like kind of religious practices on them, sort of like medicine man type of stuff. Not sure how accurate all of it is, so I can't really criticize from that point of view.
Well, you can see that they're real Aboriginals. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean they're being completely accurate, but I mean, I don't know. Maybe they have some kind of cultural advisor, but they smear kangaroo shit on his forehead. That's something that, yeah. But,
yep. And as they revive them, they do like show them how to survive out in the outback on their own. So like one of the things that probably is directly from Aboriginal history and stuff is like finding a way to like take like a straw, like a big like kind of like small tree or reed or something down into the ground and suck water from there if you're like in a certain area.
Yeah, it was interesting.
So yeah, they kind of just show them the ropes, and like Quigley shows them how to. And this is funny. I was watching MythBusters, and MythBusters explained that because they're doing the Indiana Jones. I was binge watching MythBusters on Hulu, and they were doing they were doing a bunch of Indiana Jones ones, so they wanted to make a whip, and one of the MythBusters is like, I fucking love making whips, like it's crazy. And he's like, this is exactly how you do it. and basically
they showed that. I don't remember that. So there was a scene where he makes a whip in that, or
it's actually like a rope, but they use kangaroo hide, and kangaroo hide is what is used in the best whips. So and he laced it the same way that you would lace a whip, but he was just making like a cattle roper.
A lasso or something. Yeah,
lasso. Yeah. But yeah, so like, there was that nice scene, and it's kind of like, really like gets the audience used to like, hey, the Aboriginal people aren't assholes, kind of thing. Yeah. And then, so at this point in the movie, Cora explains her backstory, and in her backstory, one of the fucked up things is she was married to this guy named Roy, and Roy was out doing something during I don't know where he was, but she was home alone with a baby, and then there was Native Americans outside. I think they said it was either Comanche, and to hide and protect and like try to hide herself from like the Comanche natives. She ends up like holding the baby's mouth shut to the point where it smothers the baby. And that's why she's traumatized. That's why she's crazy Cora. She, kind of has multiple personalities.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because she goes back and forth between being, sort of aware, sometimes, and then other times she's completely delusional. And I think it kind of stems from that she can't face the reality of. I mean, I kind of knew where it was going to go as soon as she said, I put my hand over the baby. So I'm like, okay, I know where this is going to go. But I mean, also the rest of the film takes a darker turn, I think, after that point, because there's sort of this over the top element earlier on, like Alan Rickman being thrown out the window. It kind of disappears after that point. It becomes a little more grounded and a little more realistic. So I thought that was kind of, did you feel that way, or like it was a little, like there's sort of a tonal shift from
there are a few tone shifts. Like you don't know how kind of genocidally depressing it's gonna be, because you see in like numerous scenes like from Act 2 to 3 of like the rancher of Marston's ranchers literally chasing Aboriginal people off of a cliff, where it's like borderline, like disturbing, you know, not the quality of Schindler's List, but Schindler's List level of like evil
Yeah.
is happening, you know, at least in like a smaller portion. It takes you from like kind of like happy sort of jokes, so like sex jokes with Cora and Quigley, and kind
Yeah.
of sort of, you know, your
I mean,
basic
they're not too bad, for the record, because to some people maybe that'd be off-putting. They're not like
right.
really
No,
dirty jokes or
but
anything.
it is your basic like it is your basic kind of you know, Western filler comedy, you know, comedy relief.
Yeah.
And then it's like a scene that's from a like it's from just a like a terrible like genocide scene. and then it goes
Yeah. Yes, there
back
is.
to
Right.
triumphant. So it does kind of push and pull you throughout a little bit. So
What
I see what you're
and
saying there.
well, yeah, and you're right. I mean, there's some. It does kind of just tug back and forth throughout, but to me, it felt like there was a very clear halfway point, and it's kind of at the point where Cora actually kind of clues you into just what drove her to being so crazy, and then I feel like after that point, it becomes a bit more serious after, as opposed to some of the more over the top stuff that occurs earlier on in the film. Maybe that just I don't know, maybe, but that's how I felt kind of about it. Okay, so yeah, her whole backstory is like I think you described, that she accidentally ends up smothering the baby because Comanche had come in, and the problem is it's the Comanche, and I mean I don't know, most people maybe they don't give a shit. I tend to be a student of humanitarian atrocities, so when you start to talk about the Comanche, she describes them as like, oh, they were just drunk, they didn't want to hurt anybody. The Comanche did some of the sickest, most evil, cruel shit. And so this is where we get into controversial territory, because to me, it was truly distracting, because it's like, I don't want to be wrong here. From my understanding, they didn't even really have a culture. As opposed, like all the other Native Americans hated them. They were just marauders. Their whole culture was based around this, like looting, pillaging, and murdering. And there wasn't much. They would accept like runaway criminals, bandits, white people into their ranks. They didn't give a fuck. They were just like, because I mean, like, they were just essentially bandits. And so to take the Comanche, who are just some of the cruelest motherfuckers in history, and be like, oh, they just were drunk, they didn't mean no harm, like, and so she had smothered the baby for nothing. It's like, if you used any other tribe, it would have worked. But for me, it really stood out that it was the Comanche. I mean, as I first became, I read
Oh, I
Cormac
thought that they just
McCarthy's.
did. I thought that she hid successfully, but killed her
No,
baby.
they found her. They found her, and then just like they were like, ha ha ha, and like walked away because they were just happy and drunk. No biggie. Oh, look at the
Hmm.
silly white woman hiding with her dead baby. Ha. And like, and they waltzed off. And so she had smothered her baby for nothing. And so that was really, to me, I think it was a little bit of lack of probably research. And if they had just any other tribe, maybe I'm wrong, maybe there's more to the Comanche, but everything I know is just their whole, if you could even call it a culture, is based around their, the looting and the pillaging and the plundering. They let anybody into their ranks, essentially, white, it didn't matter. So they're basically just like raiders, nomadic raiders, marauders.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was regionally, from what and this is so many years back, so I always worry about I'm getting things wrong. I know these are kind of culturally sensitive, but obviously what we did is what Manifest Destiny, and that's all well known. But with the Comanche, it's so extreme, just some of the worst shit you can imagine, that it really did distract me, especially because it's really the crux of her whole arc, going forward, that
Yeah.
this was all for nothing. And so maybe people wouldn't care, but probably say that of any other tribe and make it work. But the Comanche were sadistic as hell. I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah.
And one thing that I wanted, or one of the bigger points that I wanted to make was that Cora doesn't seem vengeful towards, indigenous people. she was always like kind of like warm, and they end up, kind of for a short period of time adopting a baby, because when they chased the Aboriginal people off the cliff, the only thing that lived was like this little baby. So
I like that they set that up a little earlier. They set it up earlier where she's looking at it and she's like, oh, she's so cute. I just thought that might just be like a one-off moment where she's, it's showing that she's thinking about her own baby. But later on, I'm really glad it becomes a redemption arc for her, because the baby's the only one to survive this massacre that we see. And through that, she gets to kind of redeem herself. I thought it was going to kind of maybe be like the John Ford movie, the Three Godfathers, where like you have this fucked up family unit, and it doesn't really, happen like that. Tom Selleck goes off, and it really just focuses on her redeeming herself through protecting the baby, but I like that. I like that she got that redemption arc. It was kind of,
Quigley was away going into town to get provisions, and a bunch of dingoes were trying to get into the cave dwelling that they're hanging out in, and then for a hot second she had her hand over the mouth again and was like, oh,
the baby's crying, and
then she's like, cry all you want, we're gonna make all the noise.
I might not leave her alone with the baby, you know what I mean? She's obviously quite mentally unstable, and I'm like, maybe this isn't the greatest idea in the world. Like, maybe she's gonna replay her trauma independent of any threat.
Independent of any threat. And I remember that's when one of the music cues was pretty damn good as well. But yeah, I just find it interesting that they play the differences between Cora and Marston, because Marston has good reason to be angry. Well, at the specific like tribe that like killed his parents or whatever, you know what I mean?
And you can always argue, same as any. This is kind of the conflict that you have, same as in America, that you have these settlers, these pilgrims or whatever, that they just want to live out their lives, they just want to set something up, and then so that conflict, blood for blood and whatever. So obviously the English are here, they're colonizing, and so on that level, you could say, they're just asking for it, but that's, I think, obviously very much an oversimplification. I don't think you're just going to reconcile the death of your mother because it's like, well, we shouldn't have been here in the first place. We're going to pack up and leave, and they killed my mother, but I can see we were in the wrong. It's so you can see where his resentment would manifest from. I think it's way too easy to just be like, well, you shouldn't have been there in the first place. It's like, he's obviously, as a character, not going to feel that way, so his, but yeah, now he wants to just kill them all, and I think that was a really interesting idea that's not really explored. It's set up, and then they don't really take it beyond that,
Well, I think just the comparison between Cora and Marston is interesting, because he has a reason, they both have reasons to be like vengeful to some degree. But
she internalizes it and blames herself. It doesn't quite work because he doesn't really have a reason to blame himself, other than, I guess, we shouldn't be here in the first place. But
Well, I don't know if it's so easy as she blames herself, but like she's able to not like group a bad group of people together with the entire population of that people, you know what I mean?
But see, that's where the problem, the whole thing with the Comanche and like I said, it all comes in because it was all unnecessary. They didn't do anything. They were just drunk. They come across her. She's hiding and she smothered her baby, and they find her anyway, and they're just like, oh, and then they like walk off, and like just leave.
Yeah, I think that's one of the problems with the movie, is that because just watching the movie this time, I legitimately thought that they had just, not heard her, that they had not heard her and had gone their separate ways.
No, she says she was discovered, and they just laughed and walked off because they were drunk. They didn't, and she says it like they didn't want to hurt nobody, and that was the thing where I'm like, okay, wait a minute, because they didn't pass up a fucking opportunity to hurt somebody. Like they relish that shit from every historical account. I mean, I know that to some degree those are going to be slanted, but too much corroborate. I mean, it's yeah, like that shit happened, you know. So I mean, I know there's sort of the demonization of the natives, obviously during that period to justify Manifest Destiny, but by all accounts, the Comanche were beyond cruel and were absolutely, they wanted to make it known. Yeah, so other Native American tribes like were like the fucking Comanche suck.
Because I figured like, you know, Cora has the same amount of reason to be angry at indigenous people as Marston does, right? But she just goes at it differently. She like understands like, you know, people are individuals and whatever, you know, love, all that stuff like conquers all. And then you know, Marston just doesn't want to think that think that they're at the same level.
Actually, when she shoots the dingoes, she says, "I got them Comanche, right? I got them." You know, like when Tom Selleck says, "That kind of fucks with that." Actually, no, I get where you're going with it. I was like, actually, that really works, and I'm just trying to. It doesn't. It's so close to lining up, but it doesn't quite
that's how I feel about a few things in this movie. Like,
yeah, it's frustrating.
Like it's close to being pretty damn good, but it settles for like kind of like fine to good. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it kind of trips over itself in some spots, but it's overall a pretty respectable film.
Yeah,
you know, its heart is in the right place. It just, yeah, I feel like it just doesn't delve into the details. And I mean, we really haven't done much of a character analysis of Quigley. And that's because like he's kind of just wallpaper, but like I don't know if that's more Selleck or if that's more just the genre.
No, it's definitely a genre thing. I don't like to do anecdotal stuff or whatever, but like if anybody could be an expert on the cliches of the fucking genre. So again, my grandfather loved fucking Westerns. And as a kid, well, the Westerns, God, I watched so fucking many that you just become so familiar with the tropes of the genre that I couldn't stomach a fucking Western for the longest time. I just couldn't fucking take it, except the Sergio Leone movies, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah.
The Man with No Name trilogy was the one exception that always stood out. I love those movies, even after being Western the fuck out my whole childhood. Took forever for me to come back to the genre. I actually really enjoy it now. Especially a lot of neo-westerns got me because they're a lot more reminiscent of the Sergio Leone movies. And then after watching a lot of the neo-westerns, which tend to be, you know, like well, I guess you could almost say that started with the Wild Bunch, which you'd brought up in one of our previous recordings, where, you know, the more violent and cynical takes on the genre. Which under my grandfather I was exposed to some of, I guess, like the Outlaw, Josie Wales.
And really, the Wild Bunch was like a thumb in the face to Westerns in a way.
Yeah.
It's like, because I mean, there's plenty of good Westerns that hit that, you know, are cliche or whatever. There are plenty of them that are good, that are still cliche. Right. But
I got them like, back to back, which is, I think, what soured my taste for it. So I didn't watch the Wild Bunch till much later in my life, and it made me kind of retroactively appreciate the, you know, High Noon and Shane and, you know, some more.
Those are my favorite. Like it's like High Noon, Shane, the Wild Bunch are probably my three favorite. But
at the time, I fucking hated those because they were so cliche to me because I'd seen those tropes play out. I know they originate with Shane.
Yeah, and with High Noon though, he's like the outsider. Like that's the thing. Like he actually has the black hat. Like the good, like the good guy wears the black hat. Like so that one kind of flipped on its head.
It's almost the start of kind of. I mean, yeah, because when was that? I mean, High Noon.
High Noon had a lot of like anti-McCarthyism to it because like there was the kind of, you know, the witch hunting of like communism in that time frame, and that's kind of what that was saying, like putting the middle finger up to. So what the Wild Bunch kind of does, it puts a thumb in the face to westerns and is like, oh yeah, you remember when that movie that John Wayne killed like 25 people in, and you didn't see a drop of blood or a drop
Yeah.
of like just, and it just didn't look evil. It was just like too
Right.
triumphant. Like it didn't look complex. Well, here you go. All our friends are just like there's miniguns. Like it.
All right. Yeah, the big shootout. He goes to a German household for, or the Klaus is the name of the son. I don't know the name of the whole family, but I think it was Klaus, right? The son's.
Mhm.
It's just like, okay, you don't know the family's name, but they take him in. They know that there's a bounty out on him, you know, because Rickman's character kind of runs things around there, short of the English army or whatever. You know, I guess. You know, he has a lot of influence in the region. Yeah, so the German family takes him in, knowing that there's a bounty on him. They treat him like one of their own, and then all hell breaks loose because Rickman sends people to get Quigley, and the house burns down. Ultimately there's a big shootout. The mother gets shot, and the husband's obviously very devastated. The child's devastated. They don't necessarily blame Quigley, but it's very unfortunate. Quigley lets one of them get away.
But like when like the mother dies and all that, I think that was like one of the last straw that broke the camel's back, where Quigley's like, yeah, I'm gonna kill all these people.
Well, he does. He lets the one guy go, but yeah, but you get, which is still actually no. You know what? He keeps doing that. It seems to be his thing. He never breaks loose of being a hero. Even because later on he's got those two dudes at gunpoint. He does blow the one away, but only once he's armed.
He brings a dress over to Cora, and they've been more flirtatious and growing like closer together. Some of that writing I don't love, so it just doesn't bounce off.
There's definitely been worse. I didn't think it was. You know, I think it worked for what this movie overall is. Like
Mm-hmm.
it, you know, you could definitely do worse. It's but again, there's sort of, I think the only reason it would be fine if it felt cheesy, you know, like it does, but I think what gets in the way of it is some of the tone of the rest of the movie gets really dark. So those cheesy over the top things kind of undermine it, and there's a tonal clash maybe, you know. So
I agree.
It worked
there.
in the more light-hearted version of Quigley, which dominates a lot of the movie, but then it gets dark, and those things undermine the darker elements. So I felt like there's sort of a tonal tug of war, but I think there's a clear halfway point where it becomes a lot darker in the latter half, and so the sort of sexual dialogue maybe feels out of place. Maybe it would have worked better earlier on, than later on.
Yeah,
after her whole backstory, kind of.
Yeah, it's just tough because Laura Sangiacomo, like she does a pretty damn good job throughout. But it's just we have like the opener where she's crazy, and kind of like we don't really know where her character's going. It's not a super welcoming character. It's kind of creepy. You don't know if she's going to be a villain in some weird way or what. Like at least initially.
That's the thing. I mean, the way the movie presents it, you don't really take her as any kind of threat. But then, like when you think of like the reality of the situation, it's like okay, it might get a little weird. But I mean, the movie's tone kind of always makes her seem harmless, but yeah, I get what you're saying, where it's like, okay, reality, which sometimes the movie wants you to swallow some reality, like when it gets darker. So that's where I mean about the kind of tonal tug of war, where it's like, I don't know if I should take it as over the top right now, or if I should really kind of take it as a more somber moment, I mean, when, but you know what I mean, where they're kind of, yeah. Okay. So,
well, there's like a shootout with like 3 of them, right? Like 3 of them go and find him in the cave, and then they chase him out, and then like when he like leaves that one guy to go like kill himself, and he's
that was early. So yeah, that's what I wanted to bring up, just because I thought it was one of the sort of better moments of the, I mean, it was during the Aboriginal massacre. So that guy was a part of it. And so there was certainly this tension of, after all that this dude just did and we watched transpire, like you could certainly see Quigley just, and I mean, obviously the movie's gotten pretty dark at this point. So you could see Quigley leaving him for dead. And you really don't know what he's going to do. So this guy's broken his back. You see him fall, as the Aboriginals did, that he led over the cliff. And his gun is like right there, but because I'm a little confused. I mean, he must have broken his back lower, so he just can't, because he has the use of his arm still. But it's just, his gun is just out of reach. And so Quigley, you know, he's like, you know, basically, it's kind of hardcore. He's like, kill me, you know, and Quigley's like, I mean, it's not quite like that, but that's where he's at, you know. It's like, finish me off. And Quigley's like, well, I could do that, but then, you know, tell me where Alan Rickman is and, you know, the position of his men and everything there. And, you know, the guy's like, well, what assurances do I have that you'll kill me, you know, that you'll honor your word and kill me? And like, basically none. And Quigley's like, well, I wonder what'll get to you first, you know, the dingoes or the fucking ants, which is really hardcore thought. But anyway, so, you know, but like, you know, it's hardcore. He starts to saddle up, you know, so I think he half fucking means it, because you just watch this guy participate in this massacre here, you know, and you can see him rationalize, like, fuck it, you know, sleep in the bed you made, motherfucker. And, you know, so, and so what actually does end up happening is interesting. It's, you know, he says, if, you know, I forget exactly what leads up to it, but it's kind of a good line, you know. It's like, well, if you don't tell me, I'll let you live, you know, which is worse than let him. Yeah, it's like, that's a good line. But he does, as Quigley's about to saddle up and take off, he tells him the position of Rickman and his men. And then Quigley hands him his revolver, and he's like, you know, he puts it in Quigley's face, you know, he's like, you got one shot, make it count. And so it's this dirty, hairy thing, basically. It's like, that's ballsy, but it was, well, you know.
It's one of those things where it seems like super gutsy, but he also knows that, like,
right,
you know what I mean? There's no other way,
man. Like, I don't think you can underestimate, like, okay, I'm a vengeful asshole, okay, I mean, I might cut my nose off to spite my face. Like, he's got some fucking nads, letting this dude put the gun in his fucking face like that, you know. But so that was a good fucking scene. I actually thought, like, that was tense. I didn't know which way it was going to go. I did. I mean, I'm sure Quigley's not going to get shot, so I guess I knew that was going to happen.
I mean, like, that's just like the funny thing about about that specific situation is because Quigley has all the cards where it's like, it's like, okay, if you kill me, you're dooming yourself to die by like dingoes and ants.
Yeah.
So I know for a fact that you will not kill me so long as there's only one bullet in this revolver.
Yeah, well, he's certainly hedging everything on that. And the guy's, I suppose he's getting a feel for it. He's probably a coward. You know, he's asking me to kill him and everything in the first place. It's like, okay, yeah, so he's probably not going to do it. But I'm just thinking, I mean, you can't underestimate the power of hatred. There is, we know because it's a movie that Quigley can't die, but people are irrational. You could take that fucking bullet, you know? I mean, like,
that's true.
So, but of course, because it's a movie, yeah, okay. So I guess the suspense is sort of cut short because it's like, well, Quigley's not gonna. Actually, no, you know, you could have it where like the dude fucking shoots Quigley. He's more, you know, he's wounded. The woman takes, you know, patches him up in a much darker movie, and then the guy's left to sleep in the bed he made and be eaten by dingoes and fucking fire ants or whatever the fuck. Like, that'd be fucking hardcore. But, you know, that'd be a great subversion where it's like, oh, there's no way he's going to shoot him. Maybe he fucking actually does. Quigley survives, but.
But yeah, so then we get into the final shootout, or the final gunfight. So there's a lot of booby traps in this final shootout, right? There's a swinging log that gets somebody, or like a log that swings and pulls up a string and demounts a couple of guys.
Right.
But in the first portion of the shootout, though, he still doesn't kill that many people. He kills probably 2 or 3, and he always like has like the Batman complex where he's like, I don't want to kill someone that is unarmed. Like if someone's surrendering, he'll even if he thinks they're full of shit, he'll take them for their word. And then as soon as they start to go for a gun again, then they'll blow them away.
Like, okay, so the dude fakes him out, right? Like, I mean, I'm like, why don't you fucking kill this guy? So you remember, because like he's like, all right, I'm putting my arms down. Or I mean, he doesn't say it like that, but whatever. And he tosses it to the dude in front, which actually was kind of, I haven't seen that done in the West. And then the guy's like, and Quigley blows him fucking away. But then the guy who tossed him the gun, he lets live. And I'm like, why?
I know. That's a great point. Could you imagine having been the guy that caught the gun that wasn't expecting it and was just like, oh, I guess I'll shoot.
That guy was really smart. It's a shame to have blown his brains all over the place because that guy actually had some. Like imagine his reaction time. That was good. But that ties in together with my earlier statement of the PG-13 thing. This dude gets shot in the fucking face. We see the pink mist. It's graphic for PG-13.
If this movie
he gets fucking, it's a split second thing, but
yeah, if this movie had like the guts to like go full R, it might lean a little more into the massacres and you could see a total tone shift where it doesn't have to like appease to an audience with the kind of with the cliche comedy bits in there.
Yeah, actually, and it might be a stronger movie for it, but maybe something would be lost. I mean, as much as those two elements don't work together, I feel like it's almost there where
maybe the sense of classical Western would be lost.
Yeah, it's actually that's interesting. So it's really a bizarre combination of classical Western and neo-Western. I think actually
it's got a little bit of Unforgiven in it, not at that quality, but at that level of darkness. And then it's got it's got like the Gunsmoke shit, like the Gunsmoke TV series where it's just kind of like,
as a kid, you know how long that went on. Okay, that's almost a certain kind of trauma to have to watch episode after episode of fucking Gunsmoke. Yeah, so I mean, who do you think has seen every fucking episode of fucking Gunsmoke? There's nobody. The people that made fucking Gunsmoke haven't seen every fucking episode. That was my childhood. It's like there. God. Yeah. So
but yeah,
I must have suppressed that shit. Fucking Gunsmoke. Okay, sorry.
But yeah, right after that whole scene that we just discussed, Quigley gets, knocked out from the back of the head by like the redheaded dude that is one of the younger.
I looked at it. It's Ben fucking Mendelsohn in his earliest fucking role, easily, that I've ever fucking seen. Gray hair now.
Him. I can't imagine him with red hair.
I know. I would never have recognized him if I hadn't looked it up. It's Ben Mendelsohn in like easily the earliest role I've ever seen him in is the ginger dude. Yeah. So
I had to look that up again.
We forgot to describe right before the big final shootout. We forgot to describe Cora being there. He kind of
he drops her off with the German people.
Yeah, it really does feel like an ending. I mean, I didn't actually. They placed so much emphasis on it that I really thought they were sidelining her for the rest of the movie. Like, I didn't think she'd come back into play. Which creates a sort of tension the way they did that, because I thought, well, actually, shit, maybe Quigley dies, right? Because they almost wrapped that up with her, right? Like the way they send her off really does feel like a finale. And so everything after that point, you do actually think Quigley might die. And there's a point at the end, I was convinced he was actually going to die. So maybe you didn't feel that way, but I suppose you've seen the movie.
It's hard. I was like 5 when I first watched this movie. So, I was 5, so I was kind of like, oh, the good guy's going to win.
Red Dead Redemption, the name Marston, and then the way he's surrounded, like everything about that scene reminded me of the end of Red Dead Redemption 1, And I was like, well, wait, shit, this must have actually been an inspiration on some level. And I'm like, if it was an inspiration, Quigley's a dead motherfucker. And sorry to play Red Dead Redemption 1. Sorry, spoiler. But so I actually thought it was going to go that route. It doesn't, but actually, maybe this was actually an inspiration because the way that scene is set up, this feels like an alternate ending to Red Dead Redemption. I know a definite inspiration for that.
You see a lot of that with like Call of Duty too, or Call of Duty, like any of the Call of Duties. There's references towards movies of the same genre.
Yeah.
In video games, so yeah, it definitely wouldn't surprise me.
Oh. But for sure though, for the record, I absolutely am goddamn 100% that the Proposition, John Hillcoat's, I think it was his first movie, with Memento, Guy Pearce, and Ray Winstone, and not Emily Mortimer. I always confuse her. We talked about, she was in Breaking the Waves. I always get her mixed up with
Emily Watson.
Mortimer. Yes, she was in that. Absolutely 100% Red Dead Redemption was inspired by that movie. So anybody that likes that one, definitely watch John Hillcoat's Proposition.
Okay, so they drag Quigley back to the ranch and they set it up so it's like 1 versus 3 for a draw to the death. And yeah, this is when it gets like bonkers stupid, like villain wise, where it's like, yeah, let's give you a gun, Quigley. You've killed my entire company so far. I don't think you can kill all 3 of us.
Like he lets him have the gun. Like he wasn't concealing it. Like he lets him have the fucking gun.
Yeah. That's kind of
okay. No, I'm sorry. I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, no.
No, that's really fucking stupid.
Yeah, it's just the movie kind of being dumb there. Like it's
okay. Commodus had the right idea. Remember Gladiator, where Joaquin Phoenix is Commodus, and that was actually true. So Commodus would dull the blades of the gladiators, and then go out there and fucking shank them and shit, and he'd be like, "Yeah, I'm victorious," right? So Commodus had the right idea, right? Don't give Quigley any bullets. I guess I don't. But
yeah,
something.
Yeah, don't give Quigley bullets because he fries all 3 of them. Just.
But yeah, okay, so just stupid. Okay.
Yeah, it's just stupid. And then the British military come, and it's like Quigley just killed like 20 ranchers, and
so all lying around. He's right there.
He's gonna get arrested or whatever, hanged. Like they want to hang him. And then
they proposition, they're like, oh, we could just shoot you right now, and so you think there might be this final standoff. That's where I thought the Red Dead Redemption thing might come into play. It's almost like an alternate ending where John Marston gets to walk away or something,
and then probably
the Aboriginals show up.
Yep. And then the best part of the movie happens, for me anyway, when the Aboriginals all line up in a big circle around everybody and surround the entire horizon. And specifically, the servant shows up too.
He's killed his owner.
He killed his owner. Like, it's like,
and actually, a dumber movie might have totally forgotten about him. So I was actually kind of pleasantly surprised that they brought that full circle in a sense.
That's kind of the heart of the movie too. So, like, they played their cards right towards the end. It's just they fall into some cliches, I think, that make it not as good of a movie as it could have been.
They cut one corner too many when they, and it kind of undermines the quality. So you do see that happen sometimes.
And then overall, kind of like, as far as like my nitpicks go, so I don't think the editing was very well done in some instances. Like,
I never thought it was bad.
It doesn't, like, I'm talking about kind of like, the pace and like the music of editing, where it's like how like one cut to another, it just doesn't bring anything special to the table. That's all.
But it doesn't totally fail. It's just average.
Right? Yeah, it's average. I do think that a lot of dialogue is not great. I think they're better with the plot lines than some of the dialogue. Part of that too could be me just wanting more Marston. and
Mhm. Mm.
that's a big
Oh, sorry,
thing.
we talked
Is
about at the very start where it's like he's definitely underutilized. I think he didn't know what they had because you said Die Hard was his first film and then this is his direct follow up. So
yeah,
I think he didn't know what they had, and it's a damn fucking shame because Rickman's great. So
I get why they wanted to make him like kind of a coward, but if they made him, hands on enough in his sort of like massacre and genocides, he could have been a more threatening villain. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
if he,
actually, yeah, that'd be. I mean, it'd be. I don't know at what point it becomes a totally different movie, but I don't feel like. I mean, they set that up. Like there was a really interesting setup where like they killed his mother, and I think most people, if they're being even remotely honest, like forget right and wrong, they killed your fucking mother. Like like I think they could have really followed up on that. We talked about that in Die Hard as well. Sufficient villain motivation. There was a great foundation for
yeah,
a villain, like, I mean, so, but they
they,
don't really follow up on it. He's just he just orders people to go get Quigley, he doesn't, we
yeah.
don't see him, he orders people to kill the Aboriginals. We don't see him being very hands-on.
I don't even think we see him kill an Aboriginal person because we see him kill
Actually,
those
yeah, we
two.
don't.
We see him kill those two traitors, and
Right.
like
Yeah, the
that is
deserters,
what it
yeah.
is. But he treats them like shit, obviously, and orders them to be killed. But I don't know.
Well,
So it's a difficult villain to really respect in many ways. Like you
well,
don't really respect his intelligence. You don't really respect.
oh, yeah, I mean, it's a minor point, but with the deserters, I think there's sort of a tension there because Quigley says he's come all this way. He's promised 50 gold up front, and Rickman pays it to him. But I think, like you said, he's distrustful. Sort of. And then I think when we see Rickman bait the deserters into drawing arms, it shows you what kind of character he is. He's like, well, I see no reason why you should be bound up, and I'm civilized and blah blah blah, and so yeah, let's take those restraints off. And then the first thing they do is go for the guns of their captor, and then he himself blows them away. So it does show that he's almost manipulative, or like he knew the outcome. He wanted to make a point, and so I think as Quigley, there's sort of that tension that that he's um, if not setting you up, he's definitely not being completely forthcoming. He's probably playing you in the same way that he's playing them. And then obviously that revelation comes a little earlier where it's like, yeah, you're not here to shoot animals, you're here to shoot Aboriginals. And the distinction might be minor for him, but it's everything for Quigley. So, but yeah.
I agree, and I guess my only other like big criticism on it is it doesn't seem overly artistic as far as the way it's shot, as far as its heart is definitely in the right place where a lot of the plot lines go, and it does bring like a lot of triumph to the movie, but like it's just not shot
I think
like expertly.
summarize that with the final scene with Cora, where there's that tense, I mean, this kind of manufactured tension about the guy, they're like, what's your name? And for whatever reason, him just saying, what is it? I actually didn't write down.
He said
Roy.
Roy Cobb.
So, and he's like, stop calling me Roy, stop calling me Roy. And then at the very end, he accepts the name Roy Cobb. And then the guy.
And part of that, though, is that the name Quigley is a wanted murderer.
Right, but that guy is looking at a wanted poster. Like, this guy looks just like fucking Quigley, right? So we see that, and it's like, well, okay, you're looking at, like, Quigley's probably not going to use his fucking name. He's probably going to come up with a made up name. So, like, I mean, you're looking at the image of Quigley, and he's like, I'm Roy. And it's like, oh, okay. So, like, I mean, like, that just was the total difference. Like, it totally just, okay, guess you're Roy, not Quigley. Okay. So.
And then it ends in a very cheesy freeze frame kiss with Cora.
Yeah.
That was of the time.
Yeah. Actually, ending on a freeze frame, I think actually is really great in horror. Like, remember that episode of True Detective where it freezes on him, like in the gas mask in his fucking underwear? Like, that was terrifying. So you can end on a freeze frame, but just
it's
not
possible, but sometimes you have to be a bayou serial killer, drug
right.
dealer
Works better in horror.
in your tidy whities.
Like The Descent. Yeah, that worked. Horror works. Beyond that,
Yeah.
Oh.
As far as a place in society, I do think that it has some significant like winks towards old westerns, but it kind of compromises the story. I don't know. One thing that I thought was interesting was there have not been, especially to this point, there have not been many movies that really attacked. I know there's been plenty of movies that have discussed, the plight of Native Americans. Not many American movies that talk about the Aboriginals at all. And even to this point, there had not been many movies about slavery. You had like the TV drama for Roots. Yeah, and then like, you have like some race movies, but yeah, it took till like Amistad, and that was like 97, I believe, and this was 90. And then like you had like Django and 12 Years a Slave. So it took a while before you even had that. So I wonder how much the Aboriginal like storyline is just American cinema is able to cope with the fact that another country committed atrocities as opposed to us. Like, it might be a much harder movie to digest for an American audience to see a mass amount of Native Americans being pushed off a cliff.
It is interesting because I looked up. This is an American-Australian co-production, so I don't know if it's a Western or a bushwhacker. It's kind of in this difficult position because but anyway, if you want to watch a movie, so I guess this is probably where we move into movies like this, right? I mean, probably.
Yeah. Sure.
John Hillcoat's, I believe, is his first film, The Proposition. It becomes a very violent film. I love that movie, but yeah, Guy Pearce, and this does definitely cover the Aboriginals and where. More than that, though, I have it here because I'm going to bring it up. This movie will fuck you up. I mean, it's not. Well, you and I are pretty well adjusted, so you'll be fine. But for the average person, The Nightingale, and this definitely covers that of the Aboriginals, and it's bad. It gets bad. It gets really fucking bad.
When was it made?
Let's see. It's recent enough. Okay, so it's released on Blu-ray 2019, so it might have come out in 2018. As a 4:3 aspect ratio, like The Lighthouse, but it came out before. Okay, well, whatever. If you want to watch, and then it just gets better from there. So it opens up. At first, it's just a movie about an Irish woman. I don't want to spoil it, but bad things happen to her, to the Brits, and then it opens up. It's not just about her anymore. It's about all the bad things that happen to the Aboriginals. About a third of the way into the movie, some of the worst, horrible, awful shit ever happens to her. And then it just gets better from there. Just opens up and becomes a really happy movie about all the happy things that happened in Australia at that time. So The Nightingale, really, fun times. Enjoy. There's a lot of talk of like the whole white savior thing, and I feel like maybe this is a movie that would get hit with that.
They do kind of call him like the spirit warrior, so they kind of deify him a little bit. So I can definitely see that criticism. It doesn't do it as obviously as as a lot of other movies. Like it's not as guilty of that as a lot of other movies, I'd say.
Well, yeah, so my whole stance on it has been, and I just feel like I don't know when the opportunity to bring it up will be again. But I feel like this is something that every culture does, and it makes the most sense to take somebody from your culture and bring them into a foreign culture, and that's how you bridge. I mean, because if the objective is to really make people understanding and sympathetic or empathetic to another culture, and we talked about this with Johnny Mnemonic, kind of the exposition dumps and stuff. The best way around that is to take a fish out of water, somebody who doesn't understand all this, and put them into a different culture. And it's just something that, I mean, I watch a lot of foreign cinema. They do this all the time, so I don't think it's like inherently wrong.
Well,
But this one's not even remotely the worst perpetrator. Like, it just comes down to how you do it. Some are eye rolling, some aren't. You
yeah,
know,
and like the big thing
If
about
I
this one
lost
too
like
is
accusation.
at the end they save him.
yeah,
So like,
you know,
and it's not through any like crazy kind of power that like he would have taught them, or like he taught them how to make like a lasso, right? Like
yeah.
that's not groundbreaking stuff. Like they have their own autonomy in this movie. Like they're not just subjects of the good guy.
But I'm
They
glad it wasn't just those few silhouetted, because like I'm like, this is 5 people. We just watched them get massacred, but then it expands to like, oh, the
yeah.
whole horizon. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
But yeah, so they save him. So as far as like the white savior criticism, I understand it. I do think there are some movies that are more guilty of that than others, for sure.
I think, but like you said,
I
think
don't think
one's
this one is super guilty of it. It does give you some of that though when they're kind of calling him the spirit warrior, and
right. But
it
then it subverts it, like it doesn't actually follow up on it. So just, yeah, I
right.
just figured in case anybody wants to level that at it, like I really don't think this is a perfect.
If they went too far into it and like had like all the Aboriginal people like bow to him or something, or show some sort of worship, like he's their god now or something, that
Right.
might be too far. But that also wouldn't work for the movie, so that's why they didn't do it.
Isn't always subtle, so I thought it might actually go there, but it didn't. So like, I mean, yeah, it averts, that trope. So
Want to start giving it stars? I don't want to affect your star rating, so I'll let you go
I
first.
mean, I hear that decisiveness is really attractive to the ladies, and I've honored that by totally splitting my review every fucking time between 2 scores. So my first would be hypercritical. This is a 3.5. But if I were to be more generous, it does what it wants to do. It's entertaining. It's exciting where it wants to be. And it mostly works. The soundtrack helps that along a lot. So a 4, but if I think back to when I was a lot more hypercritical, it'd probably be a 3.5. And yours is going to be even lower, surprisingly, by the sound of it. So,
yeah, I mean, maybe it's just that like I liked it more when I was a kid. I don't know, but upon this viewing, I'm giving it, like I'm gonna give it 3 stars. I'll give it better than 2.5.
Everybody runs into this. Most people just go, I'm not going to do scores. Like, I think scores are valuable, but yeah, it's a bit of a
Ebert's always said that like one of the things that I saw that Ebert did is like he likes doing like the star ratings or whatever. He thinks it's, I guess, fun or interesting, but he's like, it's about the context, right?
It's exciting enough. It does what it wants. I feel like it's a 4 for most people, and that's where I always end up just a half score.
I give it the one that you'd think. I give it the one that like you feel. But just the way I feel is a little mixed because I watched it and liked it more as a kid.
Right.
So, I have like 2 competing viewpoints of it. All right, I'm going to give it 3 stars because the music was very good. Its heart was in the right place. There's a lot of good plot lines in this movie. I think one of the big things that takes it down is something that we talked about where it doesn't quite balance the tone shifts. Sometimes it feels like a 1950s era, fun, happy-go-lucky Western. and sometimes it feels borderline Schindler's List, and it doesn't quite ride those waves. You know what I mean?
I mean, well, maybe more like Hotel
and more
Rwanda,
Rickman, and more Rickman.
More Rickman, yes. So I mean, it sort of dances around the more extreme violence of Schindler's List, but still, Hotel Rwanda is PG-13, but it's the same idea of like really heavy subject matter, you know, that contrasts with the lighter, hearted stuff.
Yeah, and sometimes it's kind of hard to warm back up. Although Giacomo does a really good job in her performance, it's kind of sometimes hard to warm back up to her when we're getting into the comedic scenes that go on even later in the movie. And
I do feel like there's that clear halfway point where she kind of spills her beans, so to speak. That revelation is pretty dark, and I think the rest of the movie after that point is pretty dark, and it's hard to go back into the lighter.
When I was a kid, I liked the shootout 1 versus 3 because that seemed still kind of exciting, like he might die. And then I mean, you thought he could have died here, so maybe I'm wrong.
I thought he could have died when the British Army showed up, but I mean, you know, I didn't fully even understand the 1-on-3 shootout because it's just so ludicrous. But I don't know if they were trying to make it more exciting than the Mexican standoff and the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Like they're like, what if it's 3 on 1? You know, like, and that, like, it just is kind of ridiculous.
I wish Alan Rickman's character was a little more hands-on. I wish they gave him more to do because he could have handled it. I did like the triumphant ending where the Aboriginals save him. And then the freeze frame is what it is. I guess it's kind of funny, but
it's no more abrupt than Johnny Mnemonic. So, you know, like it you know, pick that shit up and then credits. So
all right, so that's all we have for you today, folks. I hope everybody has a great day. Have a good one.